Welcome to the Wendy Cooper Show, conversations with remarkable people over 50. Today, my guest is Barbara Waxman. She is the authority on Middlescence and a passionate advocate for aging, wisdom, and thriving in midlife. Her greatest mission is to shift cultural norms around aging by establishing Middlescence, a new life stage. She is the author of 2 books examining aging, including the Middlescence Manifesto, Igniting the Passion of Midlife. Her work has been featured on CBS This Morning, Marin Magazine, and Arianna Huffington's Thrive Global, just to name a few. A Wexner Heritage Foundation Fellow, Barbara holds master's degrees in both administration and gerontology, with certifications from the International Coach Federation and the Hudson Institute. We kicked off by me making the mistake of referring to Middlescence as being related to boomer generation or to generations. Here's what Barbara had to say about that.
First, let me address the boomer part. So boomers, millennials, those are generations and cohorts that we describe. What I am doing is naming what I call life's newest stage that's born out of 21st century demographics. So in 1900, we lived to be about 47, now into our 80s. And if you're educated, you don't smoke, and no one out there should be smoking, not good for you. You exercise, you eat a healthy diet, and you take care of your spiritual self, you're likely to live longer. So those years we've added aren't at the end of our life as more decrepit years. They're showing up in the middle. Our hormones change, our bodies morph, our relationships are shifting, and we feel like in our late 40s, 50s, 60s, we're not young anymore, but we're certainly not old. It's like a second adolescence, but this time with wisdom, and I call it Middlescence. Because I believe that we no longer live according to a chronological number, but the stage we find ourselves in. And adolescence has meant, in those terms, becoming independent and able to make decisions on our own. Yeah. And people get surprised. They feel like, oh, this must be a midlife crisis. But in fact, there's a myth around the whole midlife crisis idea, because just like with adolescence, the minute you hear the word adolescence, you get this hit. Oh, I get it. It's a challenging time of growth and development, and we've got to support these kids in making through that stage so they can be healthy adults. If we name it like adolescence, we name the stage Middlescence, we can say, oh, it's supposed to be a challenging time where we say, I have all this experience, and now I'm questioning, do I want to continue to do the same job I've done for the last 20 or 25 years for the next 20? Because I want to continue to be engaged, make a difference, and work? Maybe not. Relationships, all of these things, it is fair that we question them when we have decades in front of us to live and be engaged. And by the way, they can be the happiest years of our lives. It's not a downhill kind of travail to the end. So by naming the stage, like Stanley Hall named adolescence 100 years ago, there was no such thing as adolescence before. In 2016, when I was on a gap year in Italy, on a hillside, living for a while to get enough distance from our culture and ways of thinking that I could put together everything that I've learned in my work over the past 20 years, and recognized that naming Middlescence will enable people and our culture to shift in healthier ways.
So now that it's been defined, how does it affect our lives, right? So for the longest time, I've always thought that the longer lifespan of 20, 30 years that is upon us hasn't really caught up. Our society hasn't really caught up with this problem of people living longer, yet we're still being looked at in the same way society has always looked at a chronological age. And that is off-putting Because in Barbara's point is that this longevity, and we're going to talk about that coming up, this longevity of life doesn't transfer over so seamlessly into how we feel about ourselves. And middle essence is not generational. It is basically how we feel about ourselves at a certain age, and how do we adapt, and how do we move forward into this new midlife and then later life. So this is our transition period, and it is happening and will happen to every single person living. Let's think about that for a minute, and then we'll hear what Barbara has to say.
It took 20 years, and this is why each one of us listening today has an opportunity to say, what have I learned to date, whether I'm 45, 55, 65, and what do I want to do with that? So when I was 43, when I was 43, I went back to school for a credential in coaching. It wasn't until I was in my 40s that I realized, I can mix gerontology and coaching. It was when I was in my 50s that I could take a gap period of time. And that's when I saw these trends actually were culminating in a new life stage, and decided to name it.
I thought this might be a good place to read something from Barbara's book. We're on a road, but our map is outdated. We don't know what to expect because we don't know what's possible. Or worse, we think we know what to expect, but our notions are defined by antiquated stereotypes of the past. No generation has experienced the benefits of increased life expectancy and the potential for undiminished vitality in the way that we can. By redefining the midlife stage, we redefine all the life stages that surround it. All constructs no longer apply. We are trailblazers.
So what I'm trying to do is just name the period of life this stage will go through in a way where people can say, I'm supposed to be figuring it out. I'm allowed to make changes. I understand that it takes more time, not less, for me to cultivate my energy. I used to take advantage of staying up late and getting up and being fresh the next morning when I was younger. I can't fake it anymore like that. So in fact, I have a body of work around what I call the 5 essential elements. I think one of the reasons that without any PR or really reaching out and trying, the CBS Morning Show reached out to me because they have millions of people watching, and they recognize that part of what I was saying is this isn't about people who live on the coast. It isn't about people who have money or don't have money. This is understanding that we have the tools in front of us that don't cost anything. So a lot of it, in answer to your question, is about education. It's about normalizing this period of time so that rather than this cultural efficiency around, anything over 40 is downhill, we're shifting it to say, no, it's actually complicated because you have choices and you need to take responsibility. And here's how, which is why I developed some of the tools for free that I give away for people to make changes from wherever they are today.
I started to see this common thread, and that common thread was exactly what Barbara is talking about. This transition, this angst, this not understanding how you're feeling, kind of owning it, but keeping it to yourself because you're not sure what's going on in your life and why you're feeling so confused. It happens to everyone. And it's so logical to listen to what Barbara has to say from her professional research and point of view, that going through adolescence is just as hairy as when we went through adolescence. So what do you do? How do you get through it? How do you get through it? Now, Barbara's going to give us some lessons about coaching and how she coaches people through it. My thing really is how do we change society to accept middlescence, that it does exist, and then make it a norm that as we start to reach a certain age, we begin to understand that we're in this period of our lives where we're not alone, and eventually we will come out the other side of it. That's a big one to chew on.
I've developed this model recognizing that no matter where you live, this idea of being an entrepreneur has some sex appeal to it. So we tend to want to invest our time, our energy, our personal connections, social connections, our money into entrepreneurial endeavors. So I turn that on its head and I ask people, and by the way, I work with people who are game changers in politics, in all fields, companies, and I say, what about taking care of the business of your life and your leadership? Whether your leadership is of yourself, your family, your community, or a company, or a larger sphere. So ETI is a coaching model. As a coach, I like to say I'm Californian. I've been here 35 years. I'm process-oriented. We go through the model and ask all the questions. And at the end of the day, I'm a New Yorker, and we drive to results. So it's a very actionable model that helps people actually come out with a plan.
Bingo. Plan time. So this is when I kind of challenge Barbara, which it's my right. I can do that as my show, about plans. You know, it's one thing to go through a coaching system and be coached and to find your skill set, to find your unique selling proposition, you know, to find what it is that your middlescence is saying to you and where it's going to drive you. And maybe you decide to do that through taking a coaching course or, similar to what Barbara is offering. And I always like to say, that's awesome. I think that's wonderful. And people get the tools that they need and the focus that they need, and they come away with a plan. So here's where I asked Barbara about, but how to execute that plan? What about all of the things that you need to do in order to suddenly become possibly an entrepreneur after years and years of being in the corporate world? Not everybody is cut out to be an entrepreneur. You know, you want to reinvent yourself, or you want to follow your passion and your purpose. And that sometimes is going to take a lot of work. And you can decide what that might be, which is awesome. And coaching can lead you to that. But how do you then execute it? And that's what I asked Barbara.
It's a twofold answer. First, the coaching model is called ETI, entrepreneurship turned inward, but it doesn't mean everyone's going to be an entrepreneur. It's the lens we look through in the coaching model. So I am an executive coach. I lead people who are leading teams, running companies, running movements, or running their lives and their family. So it's not that everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, but that's the mindset, as you well pointed out. And the mindset that entrepreneurs have is, if there is a problem, how can I identify it and how can I resolve that in a healthy way? The second part of the answer is a really great question. Okay, Barb, you take people through this coaching model. They come out with an individual development plan that covers everything from their health, wellness, to how much money they need to make and how to do that. How do you make sure that it happens? Everybody, every single one of us needs an accountability partner. So we make sure that sometimes people have what we call tune-ups. So I'll meet with them once a month, once every other month, once every 6 months, and they'll say to me, can we do that to keep me on track? I also encourage people to have their own board of directors. Who are those people in their lives that not only are cheerleaders, but understand sometimes what they need to help support them going forward? And we identify who some of those people might be, and they form their personal board of directors. That's another way to do it. So everyone basically leaves with an accountability plan so that they're going to move forward in a supportive way. And of course, then I'm always available. So I think any good coach is going to not just have people come up with a plan, but have a way to execute it. So, for example, hiring people like yourself, you may be on what I would consider someone's personal board of directors or on their team, call it. So that's how they launch it. And I think about it in a couple of ways. One, reinvention is kind of the buzzword, but for a lot of people, they don't want to reinvent. They love where they've been, though they want to tinker with some course corrections. They like where they are, and then they want to create, I'd say, pivot towards more fulfillment. So most people don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and reinvent everything. Some people do. But the vast majority of us just feel this inner rumbling of, I think I'm leading a B or a B plus life, and I've always been an A student. How do I go from feeling kind of blah to awesome? And those might be micro pivots. In order to do that, I'll say to people, we're not looking at the rest of your life. In the coaching work that we do, let's look at what can you get your arms around in terms of the next stage. So there was one client I had, Laura, who I worked with years ago, and I have this exercise called Your Next Chapter, writing your next chapter. She was going to be launching kids, and she had her own business, but she wanted to start a nonprofit foundation. But she knew she couldn't really do that. She also wanted to move to the city until her kids were out of the house. So she wrote her next chapter. It was about 5 years from where she was at that time. She called it 5 More Years in the Suburbs. And then, so she gave it a name. She gave it a time frame. Then I asked her, who are the primary characters in this chapter? And what is it you want to accomplish with them? And then professionally, what can you accomplish that will be meaningful in these 5 years? So we wrote, quote unquote, this chapter as an exercise. We created the plan. She developed her team. And then 5 years hence, we revisited, and she now is running a nonprofit foundation.
It's starting to feel a little bit better. Aren't you starting to feel better about yourself now? Now that you know what you're going through in your life, if you're from 45, 50, 65, and you've got this angst and you just have that feeling, right? That you are actually in middlescence. You can learn more about it by ordering Barbara's book, The Middlescence Manifesto, Igniting the Passion of Midlife. You can also go to barbarawaxman.com. There's a lot of reasons that I really connected with Barbara, and one of them is because of this. She's just about to tell me what I've always told other people about coaching versus consulting. Because I don't know about you, but there was a certain time out there before COVID that everybody was a coach. And that was driving me crazy. I've been a consultant for 23 years, 25 years. So I feel as though I'm like a coach, aren't I? Here, let's hear what Barbara has to say about that.
There are a lot of people who want to do good in the world. And so they'll say, you know what, I have a lot to contribute. I'll be a coach and help other people. But coaching is not consulting. It's not helping people as a consultant based on your experience with what they should do. And there is a lot of confusion about that. Say, here's what I did. Let me tell you, give you some advice. And sometimes I'll share advice with people, but really the most powerful coaching has to do with asking provocative questions and what we call leading from behind. I can see where someone is headed, and I'll ask them questions to help them uncover their truth. So when we do that for ourselves, it's that much more powerful, and it's also a lot more sticky. We sort of get it, and then we say, oh, I had this aha moment, this eureka moment. Here's what I think I'm going to do, when I may have seen that coming. But if I told them, it wouldn't be the same. Sometimes people have hobbies that they haven't really taken to the next level. And one of the beauties of being a middlescent is we tend to, sometimes we're in that sandwich generation where we're both still financially helping our kids and also financially helping care for our parents, or practically speaking, putting hours in caring for parents and aging relatives. But the majority of us have more disposable income to say, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to take my love of flowers and gardening, and I'm going to take steps. First, I'm going to work for someone else who has a business I respect, and I'm not going to make a ton of money. But I'm going to learn everything I need to know and decide, do I want to start my own thing? Because as middlescents, we're smart enough to know that we need to do our research, right? We need to have our feet on the ground and do our research.
Absolutely. I've spent about 28 years of my life helping brands and products and inventors and all sorts of people launch, let's just say. And there are so many tentacles to that process. I always concern myself, and I've been concerning myself with it recently a lot, because I know that with COVID, there are so many, there's going to be so many more people that are seeking advice on how to reinvent yourselves, maybe start work more from home, whatever it might be. And I fear that they'll spend money on not in the smartest way. Okay, so we're now talking about learning. And no matter what age you are, it is important to always be increasing your knowledge base. And I had mentioned to Barbara that if you were to see me in a grocery store with earpods in my ears, I'm not listening to music. I am always listening to something that's teaching me something. And that, I feel, is extremely important, especially as you get into this middlescence and this place of possibly shifting and changing and pivoting and creating something new. And this is, of course, what Barbara has to say about it.
My friend Chip Connolly, who I know you know, who started the Modern Elder Academy, he has this Wisdom Well blog. And a week or so ago, he wrote about the importance of lifelong learning, just like you're talking about. And those of us who stay hungry for learning are going to be amongst the healthiest. But what he did is he flipped it and he called it long life learning. So if we want to live long, vibrant lives, we've got to think about long life learning, not lifelong learning. You have a lot of courage, and you've got a fluidity to learning things and being comfortable challenging yourself with technology. But there are a lot of people who can use things for sure. They have an iPad, they have a Kindle, they're using their computers. But when it comes to thinking about work-related computer use, they shut down. You don't need to be like Wendy and put together your own website. What you do need in order to stay employable and, quote, in the game, is you need to keep up with the language enough that you can speak it and ask. There's this intergenerational transfer of knowledge. We have wisdom, we have emotional intelligence, we have life experience in exchange for some of the digital intelligence that, say, millennials have.
That's the key, is that we all have to work together, right? Intergenerationally. We all have these features and benefits collectively. And if we learn how to work together and we come together on understanding that middlescence is a time within your life that is going to happen, and let's get ready for it, folks, then problem solved.
By the way, people who are digital natives have a lot to learn about what life was like before the internet. And they're so interested, actually. When I talk about when you travel, or when we used to travel before COVID, they'd say, how would you meet up with people? And I said, well, people would talk to one another more. So you'd go to a hostel or some place you're going to stay, and there would be a board, and you'd look for a note someone left you. there were all kinds of ways. You'd be traveling and you wouldn't look things up on your phone. You'd ask another traveler, hey, have you found a good restaurant? What's sad for me about digital natives and even ourselves getting so used to technology is it's cutting down on our ability to know how to engage with one another and expand our horizons.
Well, folks, it can't be avoided. We have to talk a little bit about, since we are still in COVID, really what the future looks like. And so I asked Barbara what her thoughts were on what was happening in the world. And we'll wrap the show up with that and how it all kind of boils down to the universe and having respect for one another, for mankind, for our environment, and for the human race. But here's what Barbara had to say. Thanks for listening, everyone.
The combination of COVID for, 3 months now, the economy, the soil was completely fertile for one of these freaking horrific racial incidents to be the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. I don't know if it would have happened otherwise. I think that the conditions now are right. And now it's up to us to not have this be another time where we reflect, we talk, it comes to the fore, and then we let it go. I think it's hopefully what's coming through all the pain of this period is going to be a better future in many ways for all of us, including the planet.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out Barbara, her book on Amazon, The Middlescence Manifesto, Igniting the Passion of Midlife, and go to her website, barbarawaxman.com. Also, you can check me out, see what I do for a living, at wendycooper.com or cspotrun.com, the letter C, spotrun.com. Thank you, Tom Orsi, for all your help with my podcast and the wonderful music from Orsi Digital Post. And until next time, I hope everyone stays healthy, stays safe. I hope you share this episode, and I do hope you subscribe. So there you go. Until next time, thanks for listening.